everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Greg Bailey. I'm the director of our Architectural and Engineering Division here at EMG, a Bureau Veritas Group company. With me today, I have our subject matter expert, Rich Compton, who has over 30 years of experience in the building commissioning industry. During our moderation today, I would love for you to chat in any questions that you may have, and we'll try to answer them at the end, or we'll answer them online after today's session. So with that, I thank you very much for joining, and I'd like to start out with a fairly basic question to Rich. What is building commissioning?
Good question, Greg. Building commissioning basically is ensuring the client that their building is operating in peak efficiency. Not only that it's operating per the basis of design, but also operating per the operator's property requirements.
Are there different types of building commissioning that you can choose from depending on your building? Or
Sure. Yeah, there's four basic types. There's building commissioning, there's recommissioning, retro commissioning, and continuous commissioning. With building commissioning, that's more of an application for new buildings coming out of the ground. Recommissioning is designed for buildings that have been commissioned in the past and are in need of being recommissioned. Retro commissioning has a lot of overlap within recommissioning, but there's another emphasis on operating maintenance and also how other systems respond to each other. And then continuous commissioning is an ongoing commissioning process where you use analytic data from perhaps building automation systems, electrical submetering, so on and so forth.
So you're starting to tie in the digitization and the Internet of Things into the commissioning process.
Correct.
And using those analytics and data to help you keep the building tuned up, if you will.
Correct.
Excellent, excellent. Out of those four, what is the most common that you run into in the commissioning industry?
What we're seeing the most common are two of the most common is new building commissioning. We're finding that more buildings are becoming smarter and smarter as they're being built. New technologies, they're greener. You have LEED, you have Energy Star, so on and so forth that govern the new buildings. And then retro commission is very popular because the return on investment when you retro commission a building is probably the greatest of all four of the other commissioning practices.
Makes good sense. And I'll oftentimes get confused between retro commissioning and recommissioning. They seem very similar.
They do.
Can you give us a little guidance or a help in understanding the difference between those two?
Sure. What retro commissioning is, it follows a lot of the recommissioning practices initially. It takes you through the commissioning of the hardware, so on and so forth. The added caveat with retro commissioning is the ability to review maintenance practices, train the maintenance personnel on certain systems that they may not be all that fluent in. And then also with the Internet of Things and the buildings being smarter, it allows us to be able to analyze how systems are relating and sharing information between each other.
Excellent, excellent. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the retro commissioning appears to be a more holistic approach to the building, if you will, integrating that digitization, the Internet of Things, all of the new technology or older technology, but in a more holistic approach that can include lighting and other systems within the building. Is that
correct?
Correct.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, buildings are becoming smarter and smarter as technology changes. So one illustration is you may have a lighting control system in your building, and you may have occupancy sensors installed where when a client or a group comes into a meeting room, the lights turn on based on occupancy. Well, now with the Internet of Things and the interoperability of the subsystems, you can also have the VAV box go into an occupied mode and start cooling or heating the space while it's being used. Then once everybody files out of the room, the space would go into an unoccupied mode, lights turn off, VAV boxes go to a minimum airflow, and it's a great reduction on the HVAC energy cost.
That's a fantastic example. what is the ideal building? Is there an ideal profile for a building that should be commissioned?
Well, it's funny you say that because when people ask me that, I always state that every building can be commissioned.
Sure.
I've commissioned buildings that have just finished construction months before and go in and find a caveat of issues that they were having because the contractors did not work harmonious with each other, from the mechanical to the controls,
Right.
etc. But anybody that's experiencing high energy bills, for instance, year after year, your consumption seems to be going up and you can't get your hands wrapped around it. If you're walking from one room to the next and it's hotter in one room and colder in the other room, you should not be experiencing that. A building envelope should run at a steady temperature if the building is working at its optimal efficiency.
Right. I mean, I think there's a misconception, and I've always been guilty of it, that just because you have a brand new building that you just opened doesn't mean it's commissioned. It
Correct.
could not be. May not be operating at its optimized state.
Correct.
Fair.
And as a commissioning agent, we're typically a third party eyes and ears for the end user, for the client. So we are working with the mechanical contractors, electrical contractors, control contractors, test and balance, so on and so forth, to make sure they're communicating with each other and working with each other to really stretch that efficiency out of the building.
What does the process look like from the building owner or the facilities folks on site for a commissioning process?
Sure. Well, if you're doing a new building commissioning, there's typically 5 stages to it. You go in on the design phase, where you're working with the engineers and the owner to help develop the right type of systems. There's a construction phase as the equipment is being installed. There is a testing phase after the equipment's been installed, and we work with the subcontractors to ensure that they're programming it as per design and that they're functional. There is a post-occupancy phase,
right,
where we go in and just kind of put some final touches on it. And then one that's missed quite often is the warranty phase, that we like to call it, which happens 8 to 9 months after occupancy, but yet just before the warranty period on the equipment expires.
Good point.
And we'll go in and we'll do a secondary check to make sure that the equipment is still up to snuff.
Sure.
And that there hasn't been any major defects from installation or the actual manufacturing of the equipment.
Oh, that's excellent.
Now, recommissioning and retro commissioning is a little bit different. We don't have the luxury of going in early on. So what we do is we'll do a document review. We'll look at as-built drawings. We'll look at test and balance reports, previous commissioning reports if you've done one. We also go in and we might do a site visit as well. We like to go in and interview the client. We'll speak with the maintenance personnel and kind of pick their brain, because quite honestly, they have to live with the equipment.
Well, that's what it kind of segues right into the next question. How important is that representative on site that's knowledgeable and can really help you through?
Sure. They're very important, because they're the lifeblood of the building. They're the ones that have to live with tweaking equipment, ensuring that it's comfortable for all the tenants and all the spaces. They also have to make sure that the equipment is being maintained. Right. You don't want to cut short the life expectancy of a chiller or a pump or an air handler because filters haven't been changed, motors haven't been greased, belts haven't been changed, so on and so forth. So the information we gather from them is really where we get most of the good information to create a thorough commissioning plan for them.
And I'm sure it's not just a one-way street where you're helping them understand their building better.
Sure.
And some of the tricks and tips that you're giving them as you go through the process, I'm sure makes it a big piece of the effort.
Yeah, we love to have them work with us or shadow us as we go through and we fine-tune some of these systems. This way they get some real hands-on training as to what these problems are. And who knows, maybe in 6 months, the problem could resurface.
Good point.
Again, and they'll know how to go back in and address that. And we really, really like to pride ourselves on training our clients. We are teachers of the systems that we commission. We don't want to be the babysitter. We don't want to be your building operator. We want you guys as a client to be able to understand and operate your buildings because you're there for the long haul. We're there for a moment.
Good point. And that's a good point. And can I approach commissioning in a phased manner, or is it got to do this and that's that? Or
sure, yeah, you can address it in multiple stages. One of the things that I have found common is we may go in and do a chill water commissioning of the central plants, the boilers, chillers, pumps, etc., heat exchangers. Then phase, and that can be seasonal. Right, so we can go through and check the boilers, we'll say in the summertime, so they're ready for the winter. And conversely, we would check the chiller plant in the wintertime to ensure that it's operational for the summer. So that's
that makes good sense. And in the fact that you can plan around your operations, plan around seasonality for maybe
correct.
Retail when you're coming into the holiday season, you can work on different aspects of it at different times. Heating, cooling during the heating season, heating during the cooling season,
yep.
So that you can phase the approach. That makes perfect sense.
And if you have some major equipment change-outs you're going to do over the course of the year, that's another opportunity. You're going to replace a chiller, pumps, and air handlers, so on and so forth. We could be there to ensure that it's meeting the design specifications and criteria.
And about how long does the process take? And I know that's kind of a loaded question. Sure, depends is the answer.
Sure.
But how long does the process take, and what does that timeline look like?
Sure. Well, as you said, it does depend. Commissioning is really based around equipment counts. I use an illustration where we've had a building, a high-rise building, 20 stories, and it had two main air handlers. One fed the east side, the other fed the west side. And I've been in doctors' offices or specialty client offices where it's a 10,000 square foot footprint, and they may have 10 or 12 air handlers serving those areas. And it takes a lot more time to commission because of the number of equipment counts for that particular building.
No, that makes perfect sense.
So that's usually the guiding force is the equipment counts.
Yeah. Can you give us an example, maybe a retail example of a commissioning project you worked on or are working on now?
Sure. We recently had a retail client where they were doing a software upgrade to their building automation system. The one they had was a different revision, so they were upgrading it. So as part of our scope of work, we reviewed the contractor of choice. We reviewed their contract, their scope of work to ensure that what they were providing is what the client needed. What's nice about EMG is we are factory trained on numerous building automation systems. I think we're over 25 systems as well. So we're able to go in and be the expert within that system and really be able to dissect those proposals and scopes. Then as part of that, we oversee the upgrade. We ensure that there's minimal downtime to the client, so there's no loss of productivity. So we coordinate those efforts. And then at the end, we'll run the system through a test. We know that the system should be running because it's just a software upgrade, but we're going to run through the sequences of operation. And through that, we will find any type of deficiencies, whether it's through the controls or through the mechanical equipment. We may find damper linkages that were disconnected or broken, valve stems that have come apart, fan statuses are not reading, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important piece, is that the commissioning is one piece that gives you the energy and better performance, but there's also a preventative maintenance aspect to
Absolutely.
This process that can really help extend the useful life,
Sure.
prolong the life if done correctly and at the right points in time. Would you agree?
Yes, and we can also help them implement a preventative maintenance plan. We've worked with several clients where we have done that because we understand the systems and the equipment. Absolutely.
That's and then is there a commissioning case study that kind of stands out, a large building or something that you've done to just really?
Sure. Yeah, we had a client in the Washington, D.C. area, federal government installation, And we all know with the federal government, they're a little slower on getting the technology up to speed. They still have a lot of old, antiquated buildings. And we proposed to them and was awarded a contract. It was in excess of $2 million to commission a facility that was over 2 million square feet. And I know that seems like a very big number of $2 million. But at the end of the day, it took us about 2 years to do the project. And at the end of the day, the return on investment for that was less than 2 years. Wow. Another project we've done, which was similar in size, was a client who had a variety of systems within the building. They had 3 building automation systems them just by itself. They had a lot of standalone equipment as well. And what we did was we integrated them through a third-party integration device and software and gave them what we call a single pane of glass. So instead of having walls of monitors in the central command center in the chiller plant, we brought it all down to one simple device.
No,
and then also a byproduct of that was an energy savings.
Right, and that's more and more what we're seeing, and I'm sure you're seeing, is the integration and the interaction of different systems. You wouldn't think that a security or fire alarm system impacts the HVAC or lighting, but they're all very interconnected and getting more so as technology, Internet of Things, digitization. So
exactly.
The fire dampers, for example,
right,
in the system and how that can impact both fire life safety and the performance of the equipment.
Well, especially with the fire life safety, if you're already controlling the air handlers with your building automation system, the last thing you want is when the alarm goes off and there's a fire in the building for the air handlers to be running and bringing in fresh air to the facility. So being able to look at those systems and understand the fire zones where we can isolate certain floors, we can coordinate with stairwell pressurization for evacuation. We work with the smoke purge fans to be able to clear the area of smoke as well. So it's becoming more and more integrated as we go on because, again, of the Internet of Things. All this information is served up on the network for us to be able to gather and collect and not only read, but we're able to write back to the other controllers, which is a great technology.
And then as a building owner, how often or what would be the time frame for commissioning a building and how often?
Sure. Well, there's several triggers for commissioning a building. If you Google the industry standard, it's typically 3 to 5 years. They recommend that you go in and do a building commissioning. Other instances that might trigger that is if you're repurposing a space within your building, if you're turning a closet into an office, if you're if you own a strip mall and it's now going from a retail clothing store to a restaurant, you're going to want to go in and recommission it. Equipment change out, like I had stated earlier, if you're upgrading HVAC units, so on and so forth. Those are all great trigger points for commissioning a building.
Oh, excellent. I had a couple questions come in through chat. I'd like to just run them by you. You ready?
Sure.
Lightning round?
Yes.
What are some of the factors that impact a commissioning project?
Good question. More and more what we see when we get into the older buildings for recommissioning or retro commissioning is a lack of documentation, where we have to go through files and cabinets and rooms to find documents. You're checking dates on the drawings to make sure they're the most up to date for that space. Trying to consolidate any type of documents for build outs that have happened over the years. That seems to be the number one issue. Also, once we're in the building, access to equipment can slow that process down as well.
I would think that if you go into a property, say an office building, that's been repartitioned and re-space planned over time, that would be a really low-hanging fruit opportunity, because I'm sure the systems have been modified or not modified over time as the dynamics of the building were different from the systems.
Exactly.
Lighting, whatever it may be. So there is good opportunities when you changing your floor plans consistently in your buildings to have commissioning as part of that after those changes.
Sure. Just as simple as a thermostat location, right? Let's say that you build a storage room in one of the offices, and the thermostat is located in that storage room. Well, of course, the load in the storage room isn't going to change. The light's generally off. There's nobody in there. There's no equipment running. And then you have the poor soul that's sitting out in the office space with the sun coming in on the window, computers running, and they're uncomfortable. So just as simple as relocating a thermostat can be significant.
Right. And most often that I see is putting up a partition where one room is getting supplied and the return air is in the adjacent room and not interacting with each other. So those sorts of things are prevalent when you're doing tenant improvements or remodels.
Absolutely.
Commissioning comes in very.
Good point.
Another question I had, good one. Does a building being commissioned need a building management system or an energy management system in place?
Not necessarily. As much as we love to see them and have them, it makes our job a lot easier. But many buildings are just standalone, especially if you get a smaller building where they just have thermostats controlling each individual equipment. It limits what you can do somewhat on the commissioning. You're not calibrating thermostats. Obviously, that feature's not available on most. But you are able to go in and check the sequences of operation to ensure that heating and cooling are staging and coming on properly. You're not heating and cooling simultaneously in a space. It's nice to have a building automation system, but it is definitely not required. And especially if you have old technology, right? Pneumatic thermostats. Every 6 months, those should be touched and calibrated. And I know there's buildings that they've never been touched after the installation. And there are so many moving parts with a pneumatic thermostat and controller, as well as the quality of the air that's being introduced to the thermostat. You have these air compressors that build water as the compressor heads start to wear. You might get a backfill of oil in through the air lines. And the ports on these pneumatic stats are so tiny that a drop of oil can clog them up and just ruin the thermostat.
And I've got a couple follow-up questions from one of our original topics. Still a little bit of confusion coming in or clarification on retro commissioning versus recommissioning. I do the same thing. I get them very close. Is there an example that you could share with what a recommission project would be and a retro commission and
Sure.
the nuance difference?
Sure. Well, recommissioning a building, again, like I said, is going into an existing building that has probably been commissioned once before.
Okay.
You're going to simply go in and you're going to verify the hardware is working. You're going to go through sequences of operation. You're going to calibrate thermostats, sensors, other field devices, verify the operation of hot water, chill water valves, dampers opening and closing, economizer modes, time of day schedules, so on and so forth. The real difference between that and the retro commissioning is again the maintenance practices, the O&Ms, and then also looking for some low-hanging fruit that's there. When you're walking the building and you're surveying the building, looking at the motor starters, let's make sure that they're in automatic. Why are they in hand? Is the automatic not working correctly? That's done in the field and then also at the building automation system, where you may have somebody, a contractor's come in and done maintenance on an air handler or a pump, and they overrode it to the hand position, so it was running while they were doing their checkout, and they forget to release that override. It could be hours, days, or months before that point is looked at again.
Right.
And could you imagine running a 100 horsepower motor 24/7 for a month? That's a painful lesson.
Yes. No, that helps. And is the process that, you generate some kind of report and then you leave, or is there follow-on service? What does the engagement look like?
Sure. Well, we're a full-service company. Lots of firms will just do that. They'll come in with a report and an analysis. They hand it to you and basically tell you good luck. We are not like that. Like I said, we love to train our clients on their equipment and the installation. We like to follow up with them as well. Through the commissioning process, we will also develop energy conservation measures known as ECMs,
Right.
which we can put together a detailed scope of what those are, and we can assist the client in either implementing those ECMs ourselves or hiring contractors for them. We can even find financing for projects through utility rebates, government incentives, government grants, so on and so forth.
No, that's very good information, particularly on the whole cycle of your property, and bringing you back in and having that touch point throughout the life cycle.
Sure.
So not just the commissioning, which I kind of look at commissioning as when I've got a set of plans. Does it meet energy codes? Does it meet local code? Is it performing? Is it the right equipment? I look at the retro commissioning and recommissioning as those touch points during the life cycle.
Sure.
Where you're getting things calibrated, retuned, almost like taking your vehicle in for its regimented service.
Exactly.
So that it's running efficiently. You're going to be able to use it longer. And then that ongoing commissioning is just making sure everything's running and synced up properly.
Correct.
Per manufacturer specifications, industry changes, program changes. So
correct. Yeah, the nice thing about the commissioning is it eliminates a lot of the catastrophic problems that you could run into if it's being commissioned and inspected on a routine basis. And it could be, like I said, it doesn't have to be every year. It could be a 3-year process, 5-year process to do that. But through that commissioning process, and we're looking at motor amps. We can see when a motor is starting to fail. We can anticipate the extended life expectancy of it, and we can create a capital expense project or program for you that would give you an idea of when you need to start looking at replacing these units as well.
That's fantastic. Well, great information, Rich. Learned a lot.
Thanks, Greg.
Yes,
sir.
Appreciate everyone joining today. We will be sending some correspondence out about how you can touch base with us on any of your building commissioning projects. And we will be sending out some follow-ups to any questions that we get after today's session. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining, and hopefully continue the series with some other similar WebEx. Thank you.